South Korea is preparing to deliver another powerful warship to the Philippines, and this time the significance goes far beyond a single vessel. The future BRP Rajah Humabon, the third of 6 new 2,400-ton offshore patrol vessels being built by Hyundai, is expected to join the Philippine Navy later in 2026, although Manila has not publicly confirmed a specific delivery date. 2 sister ships are already in Philippine service, and 3 more are behind them, meaning that by 2028, the Philippines is scheduled to have 6 new Korean-built patrol vessels operating across its enormous maritime domain. And the timing could hardly be more important. In July, Philippine and Chinese forces were involved in serious confrontations around Second Thomas Shoal and Scarborough Shoal, including a physical confrontation involving Philippine Navy personnel and Chinese Coast Guard personnel, while Chinese vessels also used water cannons near Scarborough Shoal. China subsequently conducted its own air and naval patrol in the South China Sea, saying it was responding to Philippine cooperation with foreign countries. So while the Rajah Humabon may look like another patrol ship on paper, it is actually part of a much bigger transformation. Manila is trying to build a navy capable of maintaining a persistent presence in waters where simply showing up has become a strategic contest.
The seas around us are arenas of competition and of conflict, and emerging threats demand that we maintain a resilient maritime defense posture. In this environment, a credible Philippine Navy is indispensable to regional peace. I have directed the Philippine Navy to further strengthen its capabilities.
The Philippines has one of the world's largest archipelagic territories, but for decades its navy struggled with a basic problem. There was simply not enough modern surface capacity to maintain a continuous presence across such a vast maritime space. That weakness becomes far more serious when another major power can maintain persistent Coast Guard and naval activity around Philippine-held or claimed features in the South China Sea. The problem is not solved by having a handful of sophisticated frigates if those high-end ships cannot be everywhere at once. Manila needs vessels that can stay at sea, patrol the exclusive economic zone, monitor maritime activity, and provide a visible Philippine presence without using its most valuable combatants for every routine mission. That is precisely where offshore patrol vessels become important. The South China Sea does not require the Philippines to send a frigate every time it needs to monitor a maritime area or conduct a routine patrol. A navy needs layers. High-end combatants provide firepower and deterrence, while smaller and less expensive vessels provide persistence. If a Philippine frigate is tied up conducting a routine patrol that could have been handled by an OPV, the Navy is effectively using one of its most valuable assets for a lower-end mission. 6 additional OPVs therefore create something that the Philippines has historically lacked: more hulls available for more missions at the same time. The strategic objective is not to create a fleet capable of matching China ship for ship. It is to make Philippine maritime presence more consistent, more distributed, and harder to ignore. The 6 Rajah Sulayman-class offshore patrol vessels are being built by South Korea's Hyundai Heavy Industries under a contract signed with the Philippine Department of National Defense in June 2022. The program is worth about US $573 million and covers 6 ships, each displacing approximately 2,400 tons. They are around 94 meters long, have a maximum speed of about 22 knots, and a range of approximately 5,500 nautical miles. That range is particularly significant for the Philippines because of the geography of the country itself. Manila does not simply need ships that can sail quickly from one nearby port to another. It needs vessels capable of operating across widely separated maritime areas for extended periods. The Philippine Navy has to think about the West Philippine Sea, the country's long coastline, its exclusive economic zone, fisheries protection, maritime surveillance, and the security of sea lanes connecting the archipelago. The 6 OPVs are therefore not just replacing old patrol boats. They are expanding the number of modern platforms available to Philippine commanders. And that matters, because naval power is not only about the weapons carried by a ship, it is also about how long that ship can remain on station, how far it can operate, how reliably it can be maintained, and how many other ships are available when it needs to return to port. The term offshore patrol vessel can make the Rajah Sulayman-class sound relatively modest, but these ships are considerably more capable than a basic coastal patrol craft. The design includes a 76mm main gun, a 30mm secondary weapon, modern search radar, electro-optical and infrared systems, decoys, a helicopter-capable flight deck, and the ability to support unmanned aerial vehicle operations. The vessels also incorporate modular mission spaces and are derived from a design lineage associated with the Philippine Navy's Jose Rizal-class frigates. But the most important point is what these ships are not. They are not replacements for the Philippine Navy's high-end frigates. They are not designed to fight Chinese destroyers or large surface combatants in a direct one-on-one engagement. And it would be misleading to present 6 OPVs as if they could suddenly transform the Philippines into a naval peer of China. Their value is different. They allow Manila to put more ships into more areas for longer periods. They can handle routine maritime security missions, surveillance and patrol duties, while allowing the Navy's more heavily armed frigates and corvettes to concentrate on higher-end tasks. In other words, the Philippines is not simply buying more firepower. It is buying persistence. There is another capability that makes this program more interesting: anti-submarine warfare. HD Hyundai has said that the first OPV includes an anti-submarine acoustic detection system and configurable mission spaces. More importantly, Naval News has reported that the Philippine Navy plans to acquire towed array sonar systems for 3 of the 6 vessels, including the TRAPS towed reelable active passive sonar system. If implemented as reported, that would give those ships a dedicated anti-submarine capability that would significantly expand the Philippine Navy's ability to monitor the underwater environment. Why does that matter? Because the South China Sea is not just a surface battlefield. Underneath those waters is another battle space involving submarines, underwater sensors, and the movement of naval forces that cannot easily be detected from the surface. A country trying to build a modern maritime defense network therefore needs more than surface ships and coastal patrols. It needs the ability to understand what is happening beneath the water as well. That means the Rajah Sulayman-class could eventually contribute to a much broader Philippine maritime picture, particularly when combined with aircraft, drones, coastal sensors, other naval vessels, and allied intelligence. The ship becomes one node inside a larger network. And that is where this story gets much bigger. This is not merely a future procurement program. The transformation has already started. The first vessel, BRP Rajah Sulayman, arrived in the Philippines on January 17, 2026, after sailing from South Korea, and was formally commissioned on February 24. HD Hyundai delivered the ship approximately 5 months ahead of the original schedule. Then came the second vessel, BRP Rajah Lakandula, which arrived at Subic in May 2026. Philippine Navy leadership has said that the additional OPVs will significantly increase the fleet's ability to conduct patrols in the West Philippine Sea. And that changes how we should look at the program. 2 are already operating. The third, future BRP Rajah Humabon, is moving through the pipeline. 3 more are still to come. So this is not a story about one new ship appearing in a Philippine naval base. It is the beginning of a 6-vessel increase in the number of modern patrol platforms Manila can deploy across its maritime territory. The third ship, future BRP Rajah Humabon, carries the PS-22 designation and is the next major step in this 6-vessel program. Public reporting indicates that construction has progressed substantially and that the vessel is expected to arrive later in 2026. But the Philippine Navy has not publicly announced a confirmed delivery date. That distinction is important because the strongest version of the story is not the ship has already been officially scheduled for delivery next week. The accurate story is that the third vessel is expected to follow later this year, while the exact date remains unconfirmed. And that actually makes the broader story more interesting. Because Rajah Humabon is not the destination. It is another piece of a much larger Philippine naval expansion. South Korea's role in that expansion has become increasingly difficult to ignore. Look at the timeline. The Philippines first acquired two Jose Rizal-class frigates from South Korea, with deliveries beginning in 2020 and 2021. Then came the 6 offshore patrol vessels. The Philippine Navy also received two 3,200-ton Miguel Malvar-class vessels in 2025, bringing significantly heavier capabilities including vertical launch systems, anti-ship missiles, AESA radar, torpedoes, and close-in weapon systems. Then in December 2025, Manila signed another major contract worth roughly PHP 34 billion, or around US $585 million, for two additional 3,200-ton frigates scheduled for delivery by 2029. Now step back and look at what that means. South Korea is no longer simply delivering individual ships to the Philippines. It is becoming one of the central suppliers of the Philippine Navy's emerging fleet architecture. That creates advantages that go beyond the individual vessels. When a Navy operates multiple ships from related designs and the same industrial ecosystem, training can become more standardized, maintenance procedures become more familiar, spare parts requirements can become easier to manage, and crews develop experience with a common supplier base. HD Hyundai has also established a logistics support center at Subic Bay Naval Base for maintenance, repair, and overhaul of delivered vessels. That is a major strategic advantage for a Navy that needs to keep more ships at sea. A warship that cannot be maintained is not a strategic asset. The numbers reveal just how significant the relationship has become. According to the outline's cited reporting, once current programs are completed, HD Hyundai will have built 12 warships for the Philippine Navy, 2 Jose Rizal-class frigates, 2 Miguel Malvar-class ships, 6 Rajah Sulayman-class OPVs, and 2 additional 3,200-ton frigates. 12 ships from one major South Korean shipbuilder is not just a procurement statistic. It creates commonality. It creates training familiarity. It creates maintenance familiarity. It creates operational experience. And it creates a long-term industrial relationship between Manila and Seoul. That matters, because modern naval warfare increasingly depends on sustainment. A Navy needs ships, but it also needs spare parts, maintenance infrastructure, software support, technical expertise, trained crews, and reliable logistics. South Korea is therefore becoming part of the Philippine Navy's long-term military ecosystem. And that has geopolitical consequences. So what can 6 offshore patrol vessels actually do against China? The honest answer is, they cannot by themselves change the military balance in the South China Sea. China possesses a vastly larger and more sophisticated naval force. A 2,400-ton OPV is not going to fight an 8,000-ton plus Aegis destroyer on equal terms. But that is not what these vessels are designed to do. Their strategic value is persistence and force distribution. They can potentially conduct exclusive economic zone patrols, maritime domain awareness missions, fisheries protection, escort and presence operations, surveillance, law enforcement support, and humanitarian missions, while selected vessels may contribute to anti-submarine surveillance. The Philippine Navy has specifically described the OPVs as instruments for protecting the country's maritime domain and patrolling its EEZ. Think of the Philippine Maritime Force as a layered system. Frigates provide high-end combat power. OPVs provide a persistent maritime presence. The Coast Guard provides law enforcement and civilian maritime presence. Aircraft and drones provide surveillance. Coastal missile systems provide land-based deterrence. And allied forces provide additional sensors, intelligence, logistics, and combat capability. The real strategic value emerges when all of those pieces operate together. This is where the story stops being about ships and becomes a story about military architecture. The Philippine Navy is increasingly operating alongside the United States, Japan, Australia, South Korea, and other regional partners. In February 2026, American, Japanese, and Philippine forces conducted a maritime cooperative activity inside the Philippine EEZ involving the USS Dewey, BRP Antonio Luna, and BRP Gabriela Silang. The Philippines has also conducted maritime exercises near Scarborough Shoal with American forces. So the Korean-built OPVs are not entering an isolated navy. They are entering a force that is increasingly expected to operate within a multinational network of sensors, communication systems, and military platforms. That makes the Hanwha Systems contract particularly interesting. Hanwha has been contracted to provide combat management systems and tactical data links for the 6 OPVs, with the combined contract reportedly worth about US $34.5 million. And that changes the story. It is not simply more ships, it is more connected to ships. In modern maritime warfare, connectivity can determine whether a platform is merely patrolling or actually contributing to a wider operational picture. Now comes the most important reality check. 6 OPVs will not suddenly give Manila naval superiority over China. They will not eliminate the enormous disparity between the Chinese and Philippine fleets. And they will not make the South China Sea safe simply because more Philippine vessels are present. But that is not the right measure of success. The real question is whether the Philippines can move from a navy that struggles to maintain continuous presence across an enormous archipelago toward a navy that can sustain operations across contested waters while preserving its higher-end ships for situations that actually require them. That is where the OPVs could have a significant impact. Imagine the difference between having a small number of modern vessels that must constantly rotate between missions and having 6 additional patrol ships that can be distributed across multiple maritime areas. Suddenly, Manila can maintain more persistent surveillance, respond more quickly to incidents, and keep more expensive combatants available for higher-end missions. The ship does not need to defeat a Chinese destroyer to be strategically useful. It simply needs to make Philippine presence more continuous. And that is exactly what Manila has historically struggled to achieve. There is also a message here for Beijing. The Philippines is not attempting to build a navy capable of defeating China by itself. That would be unrealistic. Instead, Manila is developing a force that makes it harder to operate around Philippine maritime interests without being observed, monitored, or challenged. That distinction matters. China's maritime advantage is enormous, but persistent Philippine presence changes the operating environment. More Philippine ships mean more opportunities to document encounters, monitor activity, maintain presence, and coordinate with allies. At the same time, the Philippines' growing relationship with South Korea is not occurring in isolation from its partnerships with the United States, Japan, and Australia. The emerging model is distributed. Philippine ships, American intelligence, Japanese cooperation, Australian exercises, South Korean technology, and an increasingly integrated regional security network. That does not mean these countries have created a single military alliance directed against China, but it does mean the Philippines is becoming more deeply embedded in a regional security architecture. And this brings us back to the future BRP Rajah Humabon. The most important thing about this ship is not that it is the newest Philippine warship. It is what its arrival represents. The Philippines is gradually acquiring enough modern vessels to maintain a more persistent presence across its own maritime domain. The 6 OPVs are part of a broader fleet transformation that includes frigates, corvettes, surveillance systems, coastal defense weapons, and deeper cooperation with regional partners. South Korea is becoming central to that transformation. And the South China Sea is providing the strategic pressure behind it. Every confrontation around Second Thomas Shoal, every encounter near Scarborough Shoal, and every dispute over Philippine maritime rights reinforces the same basic requirement for Manila. If the Philippines wants to defend its maritime interests, it needs the ability to remain present. Not once, not occasionally, but continuously. That is what 6 OPVs can provide. And that is why the arrival of another Korean-built patrol vessel is much bigger than another ship entering the Philippine fleet. BRP Rajah Humabon will not by itself change the balance of power in the South China Sea. China will continue to possess a much larger naval and maritime force, and the Philippines will still depend heavily on alliances, intelligence, surveillance, and higher-end combat platforms to deter serious aggression. But 6 Korean-built OPVs backed by new frigates, corvettes, coastal missile systems, aircraft, drones, surveillance networks, and allied patrols could fundamentally change something just as important: how often, how widely, and how persistently the Philippines can defend and monitor its own maritime domain. And that may be the real transformation underway.